Good afternoon and evening, everyone, from both the United States and Israel and around the world. Welcome and thank you to everyone for joining us for the second in UTJ's series of high holiday related programs with Rabbi Ira Grussgott presenting on Contemplating Coronation. Please note that this program is being recorded. Also, everyone is muted. But we welcome your thoughts and comments and questions in the chat, and we'll do our best to address questions at the end of the program. My name is Noah Gradovsky. I'm the Vice President of the Union for Traditional Judaism, and I will be hosting today's program. Before we begin, I want to make a couple of opening remarks. First of all, thank you to those who have sponsored the program. Which are Juan Mesa Fredel and myself. I'd also like to thank everyone who made a donation along with registering for this program. For those of you who are new to UTJ, let me add a few words of introduction to our organization. The UTJ, Union for Traditional Judaism, is a group of rabbis, scholars, and lay people who advocate for a passionate, open-minded approach to Torah study and observance of Jewish law, rooted in classical religious sources and informed by modern scholarship. Our philosophy is distinguished by the symbiotic relationship between faith in the God-given Torah and intellectual integrity, and our emphasis on the sacred framework of halakha as our unifying guide. Finally, let me introduce our speaker, Rabbi Ira Grussgott. Over the past 2 decades, Rabbi Ira Grussgott served as spiritual leader of Sharei Shamayim, and Shar HaShamayim, 2 of the largest traditional congregations in Philadelphia and Montreal, respectively. In Philadelphia, he was a columnist for the Jewish Exponent and served as president of the Philadelphia Rabbinical Council. While in Montreal, he was elected president of the Jewish Board of Ministers. Rabbi Grussgott also served as chairman of Morashah, the Rabbinic Fellowship of the UTJ, and is also UTJ's former development director. He is currently living in Nahariya, Israel, with his wife, Miriam.
Shana Tova. Rosh HaShanah. Contemplating a coronation through its order and cycle, or how to start a new year Jewishly. Now I quote from Jonathan Sacks: "No Jewish holiday is more diverse, more varied, and apparently contradictory in theme than Rosh HaShanah." And just contemplating that fact left me somewhat apprehensive about how to cover the subject so wide-ranging in under an hour via Zoom. Kind of reminded me of Woody Allen, who bragged that he took a speed reading course, finally said he could finally finish reading and finishing War of Peace, Leo Tolstoy's classic. "I read it cover to cover," Woody said, in under 20 minutes flat. Now I can tell you what it's about. Want to know what it's about? It's about Russia. Well, Rosh HaShanah is not Russia. And the Machzor, the book associated with its proceedings and service over 2 days, is longer than any book written by Tolstoy. Because it's also more Rosh Hashanah, as the Machzor has us go from cover to cover. It's more than just about war and peace. It's about life and death. It's about fate and faith. It's about heaven and earth, justice and mercy, right and wrong, good and bad, as experienced as we are supposed to be guided along over time. And I'm not talking about the time it takes from the beginning to the end of the services. It's experienced over time as we know it in life, in our lives and beyond. So, as you'll forgive the pun, to quote from my colleague, Rabbi Bob Pilavin, there's no rushing through it. There's no rushing through Rosh HaShanah. As congregants, actually, and I see one or two congregants of mine, as congregants respectfully have asked me to do over 40 years as either a rabbi, cantor, right, Bob, or both. There's no rushing through it. And as my wife still asked me and begged me 10 minutes before we start, even after retiring, there's no rushing through it. That being said, I will try. I will try not by preaching, but rather by teaching, not by singing, but rather by singling out the symbol of the day, the chief symbol of the day, the order that represents the order of the business, shofar, and connect shofar to machzor, meaning lining up the tekiyot to the text that accompanies the sounding of the instrument, to see how the sounds are symbolic and how they correspond to the time in which they are sounded and in which we hear those sounds. In this way, I think only in this way, for me, is how we can contemplate coronation as symbolized by the shofar, through it, the order and cycle as outlined by machzor, which is, of course, a form of a sidur, seder, the order of the prayers. Machzor meaning specifically with a cycle, which I believe is given to the text for Rosh HaShanah because there is an emphasis of a cycle of time. This is necessary, for too often when we focus on shofar independent of the machzor, shofar, we concentrate what? On the sounds, and the sounds it makes, tekiah, shvarim, truah, and how these sounds mimic the human expressions for sighing and crying and sobbing, or even shouting. So what is it? A whole array of human sounds. Is it an alarm? Is it a call to arms? A triumphal shout? And all of this, which we certainly don't have time for tonight, as much as we should concentrate on these things, and as much as rabbis over the 40 or so years that I've preached and taught have mentioned this, for today, sometimes it can be distracting because we have to put first things first and concentrate on this chief symbol, if not the only symbol, which is coronation. The shofar heralds the arrival of royalty in our midst, a divine royalty, Melech Malchei Hamlachim. More than it marks the beginning of a new point in time. That's where not only shofar, that's where the association to Rosh HaShanah gets confusing. Rosh HaShanah, what do you mean? No, we don't mark the time, a new year. That's what it means. Rosh HaShanah, a new year, right? Wrong. Because Rosh HaShanah, the two words Rosh HaShanah, is actually not used to describe this day. So where is the text of the Torah reading? The maftir that we recite on that day from the Torah, just to remind people why they're here. It says, "B'chodesh hashvi," right? On the seventh, on the first day of the seventh month. What do you mean seventh month? Okay. Rosh Hashanah is not the new year. It's actually one of four, according to the Talmud. And Rosh Hashanah is in the seventh month in a year, which begins in terms of annual cyclical beginnings, which begins with Nisan, which is Rishon. l'chodshei Hashanah, right? Nisan, where we have the beginning of a people and a nation. And according to an opinion of the Talmud, even the beginning of the creation. That applies to the first or the 15th day of the first month, which is Nisan. That's not Rosh HaShanah. If there's anything new that is we mark in time, it is time in the present tense. It's not in the past historical sense. Hayom, 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 hayom harat olam. Today, the world, if you understand and appreciate Sachs's careful translation of the words, which unlike a lot of English translations of the Machzor, today the world was born or was created. No, hayom harat, it doesn't say hayom bara olam. Hayom harat olam. Today the world is being born. Today the world is being formed, discovered, as if you will, rather than creator. Sort of like Columbus discovering America. Discovering America on my birthday, actually. But I know it's not very popular to invoke Columbus for insofar as anything positive is concerned. But we should realize and recognize, I don't know, Columbus, who discovered, America. But that's not what we do on Rosh Hashanah. I'm not, God forbid, comparing God to Columbus for discovering anything as much as creating so that we discover and we have the world revealed and realized on this day. What may have occurred either 5,772, 3 years ago, or 6 billion trillion years ago, totally irrelevant, totally irrelevant. The Hayom Harat Olam, it's the here and now. That's the focus for Rosh HaShanah and its coronation and the marking of the day on which the world comes into a new realization. So we focus on the creation, not so much on the creation, but the creator. Who each and every day we should realize that, the world is actually being formed every day. It's sort of like the same thing in connection, if I can use another less than reverent analogy, to Mother's Day, where the classic question, well, every day is Mother's Day, whatever. Yes, but we do set aside one day, even though we should honor our mother every day, but there's Mother's Day. Well, Rosh HaShanah. Of course, Hamachadesh B'tuvo B'chol Yom Tamid, that God renews each and every day, Maaseh Bereshit, the work of creation. But it's a day that is singled out for extra emphasis. So it's not so much the event that has passed, but an event that we should be feeling here and now, not like an ordinary everyday event. So it's not so much, again, about the past and events such as revelation, but it is about the revealer. Today, a new world is being born for all of humanity. Actually, Rosh HaShanah, and for this I'm grateful to Rabbi Meir Soloveitchik in a brilliant essay, and who makes the point that Rosh Hashanah is actually not just for Jews, it's the Rosh Hashanah for all of humanity, a new year for the world. But only Jews know that. Only Jews would celebrate a new year like that. Were Rosh Hashanah to be understood as a new year for the Jews, well, why don't we mark it, I guess, like other people mark their new year? I mean, I don't know. I grew up all my life, and still on TV, I watch as the new year begins. I can't do it now in Israel, But if I want to be nostalgic, I go on my TV. Once or twice I was actually in Times Square, and along with the other, less than rational people, I guess, we're sitting, we're waiting, and the ball drops, and with the mark, and it's exactly, yeah. And then what do? The firecrackers go off, a chauffeur, so to speak, and we don't blow the chauffeur, but there are hundreds, thousands, perhaps even millions of those little, wow, Happy New Year. So why don't the shofar? I guess why don't we use a shofar similar to the one that's used round the world to mark the new year? And why don't we do it on time? When does New Year's begin? When does a new year begin? In the secular calendar, depending on the time zone, wherever you are, it's 12 midnight, okay? Right? That's in the beginning. And Rosh HaShanah begins the evening before, right? As we understand, Judaism, Vayhi Erev, Vayhi Boker, and it was evening, and it was day, Yom Echad, first day, which begins at night. Sorry for the confusion. So, well, let me be less confusing. So what do I know? I'm asked to come to shul. I take a sitter, and here a machzor. And here it's something that I actually recommend for everyone who speaks English and can also, even if you can't read Hebrew, terrific machzor, which starts on page 1, right? And that's the evening service. Okay, so when does Rosh Hashanah start? Okay, forget about the evening. Let's start in the middle of the day, in the beginning rather of the day. The beginning services in the day, I don't know, page whatever it is. But maybe the beginning of the theme. That's on page 346. What is our theme for Rosh Hashanah? The coronation and the coronation of the king. And before I was a rabbi, I was a cantor. So this is how I would start. Hamelech, the king. Yoshev, who sits on a throne, high and lofty. He inhabits eternity. Right? Ram v'nisa. That's when we blow the shofar, right? Wrong. We don't blow the shofar. Then, why? Why? Well, to tell you why we have to wait till, let me go to the middle of this book, containing well over 1,000 pages. Is that longer than Tolstoy's War and Peace? Yeah, I think so. We go to the middle of the page to blow the shofar to understand. Let me explain with 2 personal anecdotes. One that I remember actually in a personal, somewhat painful way with Rabbi Siegel. Maybe I should share this anecdote before Yom Kippur, where I made confessions. Rabbi Siegel, I tried to be a good student in Mesivta Crown Heights in Brooklyn, and Rabbi Siegel, there's actually a book written by Art Scroll about what a machanech, what an educator he was. He tried to get all of us boys who were a little wild, even if we were nice Jewish boys in yeshiva in Brooklyn. But he would take attendance. And he wouldn't say, it would sort of like, that's where he mimicked the army. Everything else that was goyish, he didn't like to do. But he took attendance like a drill sergeant. And he would call out our names before we begin. And he said, he started alphabetical order. Abramson, here. Bornstein, here. He got to Grussgott, and of course, being slightly absent-minded, let's say, or inattentive, I didn't hear the roll call of attendance. I was staring out the window, and he said again, this time a little louder, Grussgott. And then I woke up and I said, here. And then Rabbi Siegel told me, Grussgott, you're here, but you're not here. You're here, H-E-R-E, but you're not here, H-E-R-E, because you're not here. You don't hear. That's the first story, which will explain why the shofar is sounded as late in the service. I have one more anecdote. I guess I didn't listen to Rabbi Siegel, and I didn't pay attention, especially when he advised all of us not to go to college. So I went to college. Where in Brooklyn College of all subjects, I also concentrated for a while on speech and theater, And in speech and theater in Brooklyn College, one of the courses didn't have me necessarily on stage, but it was called Reader's Theater. We took a work, perhaps a work by Tolstoy, where we had to act out the script, which me and a lot of other students at the time kind of resented. We have the script in our hands. There's no need to memorize it. So let's just begin to do it. And that's when the college professor reminded us all of a classic anecdote, which is appropriate for my point. It's about the thespian, the aspiring thespian, who is prepared and ready and qualified to take on any role, Shakespearean, the leading role of any of Shakespeare's plays. Hamlet, Macbeth, King Lear. But he only got one line. What was the line? Your line, John, is to strut on stage and say, and when you hear a canon, this is what you say. Hark, I hear the canon. That's it? Yes. Well, he's dedicated and he's committed and he's prepared. He's professional. And so for 6 minutes before he struts on stage, and maybe he doesn't even have to say, he doesn't have to come on stage. He just has to respond off stage. Hark, I hear a canon. So he practices and he rehearses. Hark, hark, I hear a canon. Hark, I hear the canon. Hark, I hear the canon. All of a sudden, oh, what the heck was that? What the heck was that? Ladies and gentlemen, for the shofar to appreciate the sound, we need not just to rehearse. We need not just a rehearsal, and we need not just a practice. We need to be here to hear, but the preparation. We need to be prepared and not to be caught unawares. Rehearsal and practice to be here to hear is required for the sounding of the shofar, so that we can finally understand, even after what we said an hour before, HaMelech HaYoshev Al Kisei Ram V'Nisa, for the sovereign who sits has arrived, and he's sitting, perhaps sitting and waiting for us to hear the sound of the shofar, not the sound of the shofar. The bracha is actually bracha ta Hashem l'keinu melech haolam rezi yolah. It doesn't say litkoa shofar. It says lishmoa kol shofar, to hear the sound of the shofar. Okay, so we come to shul on the day. We've said HaMelech HaYoshev. We've even said Avinu Malkeinu. We've referred to our sovereign as a compassionate parent. We've listened and followed the Torah reading, all the Haftorot, all of whose themes are underscored to reinforce the single theme of Hashem as compassionate and merciful is still sovereign. That's the chief theme for all the prayers, and which include the Torah and Haftorah readings. And so, we finally come to the shofar. We come to the shofar, and let me go now to the shofar when it sounds. So it doesn't start on page 1. Where does it start? In the Sachs Sidur. Oh, here it is, the blowing of the shofar. Page 492. No, that's not. Wait, it says blowing of the shofar. Wait a second. We don't, I'm sorry, we don't blow the shofar till page, oh my God, till page 497. Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haMashiach Hashem is also built the Shmoa Kol Shofar, has commanded us to listen, to hear, to be present and accounted for, aware. The sound of the shofar, then we say Shechiyanu. But wait a minute, but before, we're still not ready. It's still not time. We say Lam Natseach. We say Lam Natseach. Lam Natseach Livnei Korach. Excuse me. Lam Natseach Livnei Korach. It's Psalm, where is it? Psalm 47. Lam Natseach Livnei Korach Mizmor. The psalm, which actually begins Kol Ha'amim Tiku Kaf, for the okay, sound your hands together. But of course, the heading of the psalm, which is very significant, I believe. Lam Natseach, what does it mean? Lam Natseach, for the choir master, for the conductor. Okay? Then it says Livnei Korach, dedicated, or it's Lam Natseach, for the choir master, to then direct the whatever the order, to give the order as the conductor, to Livnei Korach, to the sons of Korach, who happen to be Levites in a choir, Mizmor, to sing a song. But let's take those three headings, so to speak, prior to the shofar being blown, element by element. Lam Natseach means conductor. A conductor implies choir. A choir implies a crowd, meaning that you cannot do any coronation. A shofar cannot, I understand the exceptions to the rule, as I used to do when I used to walk miles to blow shofar for someone who was sick in the hospital, whatever. But generally speaking, a shofar is a coronation, and a coronation has to be done, at least ideally, initially, in a crowd, because we are taught uva makalot ribavot amcha beit Yisrael, that we mentioned that over an hour ago in the morning services in speaking of coronation. So Lam Natseach, now we have a conductor with a choir, with a crowd. What about the choir members who are selected? Why dafka this psalm? I'm not talking, fact now. This is my theory. So I know that my brother-in-law, Professor Rabbi Dr. Gershon Bacon, he likes me to stick to the facts as history reveals them. This is a thought. This is a drush. Livnei Korach. We know that they are the children of Korach. We know that they're Leviim. That's a historical fact. They're Levites, and Levites do the singing. But I believe this is selected, Livnei Korach, the Levites, a section of the chorus, who what I call are contrite choir members. They are contrite Levites. B'nai Korach, the archetype of their father, not Avinu Shebashamayim, but their father in their house, who actually represents rebellion against any authority, particularly of a higher than himself, Kulam Kedoshim. So in a way that's a fitting, it's an element for Yom Teshuvah, Yom Hadin, okay? Livnei Korach. And what are they supposed to do in preparation for the sounding of the shofar? We have the crowd, we have the choir who are contrite, and they do mizmor, a sacred song, which is not a prayer, not a lament, a song sacred, set aside. And interestingly enough, at this point, it's not out loud. We take that psalm, and instead of singing it in harmony, what do? Well, Sachs tells us in congregations, the following psalm is said 7 times, 7 to represent the holiness, the sacredness, as 7 always does, on this, the 7th month, and there are 7 other associations for the number 7 for Rosh HaShanah. But 7, generally speaking, represents as the Sabbath day, holiness, something that is kadosh. And we say it 7 times silently. Here, quoting Sachs, a coronation psalm. See, that's why I'm grateful for Sachs to point out the chief symbol of the shofar. A coronation psalm, proclaiming God's majesty and kingship, making special reference to the sound of the shofar, of course. Where is it? God is raised up in sound, in the voice of the shofar, okay? But why silently? I've always wondered myself. Obviously, to be prepared. This is what I call the hark, I hear a canon moment, where we repeat and prepare so that we don't wind up saying, what the heck was that? When it comes to the shofar. At long last, we are now prepared to say the bracha and also the shehecheyanu to mark a beginning of the arrival of the king, whose presence is heralded. And this is the set of the shofarot. The shofarot, the sounding at this point, is called, for reasons which I didn't fully understand until I prepared for this talk, as miyushav. Again, confusing, especially when you're first learning, and no matter at what age, whether you're 8 or 80, and you translate literally, oh, this miyushav. Anyone know what miyushav means literally? Miyushav? Sitting. Hamelech hayo, I guess it's for imitation of Hamelech hayoshev al kisei. So it's an established, this is the time when we do the tekiyot to reinforce Hamelech hayoshev, who is established, who has arrived, sitting, not standing or marching, sitting. Even though we stand now for the tekiyot miyushav, and now we're prepared. So what follows? What follows, following the coronation, which is represented by tekiyot miyushav, we've only just begun. See, this is why there's no rushing through it. We've only just begun. Now we have another set of tekiyot me'umad. Now, again, the literal translation or the real explanation, well, that's called the standing because that takes place in the Amidah. In some congregations, both silent and repeated in the repetition of the Amidah. The Amidah, when we're, quote unquote, stand at attention, when the tekiyot are sounded for in a different time, even psychologically, spiritually, than the tekiyot, to represent something different than the tekiyot miyushav. We now have the tekiyot. This time the focus shifts almost subtly. When I say miyushav and me'umad, I'm not talking about a shift in posture, standing and sitting. There's a shift now in the purpose and in the direction and in the emphasis, because Tekiyot Miyushav is strictly and only, exclusively, all about Hashem. But in the Amida, it's still, of course, first and foremost about Hashem. But the Tekiyot in the Amida references us, we, the subjects of the king, the subjects. Im kebonim, im ke'avodim, whether we be the children of God or serving God as loyal subjects and citizens, perhaps even servants. We wait for the king. In a sense, it's like, to compare the analogy to what we've seen on TV, we're sort of waving for the royal procession, maybe the king himself, to wave to the crowd, So this time in a subtle, if not devious way, as in every Amida, which is classically divided into three parts, where the middle and focus on the regular Amida, first we praise God, right? And then we conclude with thanking God. But what's in the middle of every Amida, with the exception, of course, of Shabbos and Yontif? But in your classic Amida, we have a total of 12, 13, if you will, bakashot. We have the text, the middle of Amida, with requests and needs and wants and desires. On Shabbos, we don't do it. And on Yontif, we just have an acknowledgement of the day. But Rosh Hashanah is a little sneaky. I mean, that's why possibly we don't say Hallel maybe on Rosh Hashanah, because we do have wants, we do have needs, and we do have desires, not the general prosaic desires, but we have desires and needs and wishes to be heard in three different dimensions. So regarding the shofar and its focus, it shifts. On Rosh Hashanah, we have the three sections within the three classic sections of every Amida. In the middle section is divided into three, which is Malchiot, Zichronot, and Shofarot. Malchiot, Zichronot, Shofarot. And forgive, Malchiot is what? Malchiot is kingship, where we acknowledge God as king, God as sovereign. Zichronot, loosely or if coarsely translated, remembrance. Shofarot doesn't mean, a whole, or the horn section of a band. Shofarot meaning the symbol of shofar, which is redemption. You have, in a sense, Malchiot representing the creator, not just creation, but the creator. You have Zichronot as representing the revealer, if not the day of revelation. And for Shofarot, you have so much the day of redemption, but the Redeemer, the focus. Well, so forgive the very prosaic and inelegant and less than regal analogy to make my point about coronation, but I'm going to compare the proceedings now to the process of getting a loan from a bank, a legitimate bank. First, you think about why you need a loan, right? Why you want a loan. And then you determine that you can't get that loan all by yourself. Then you think about the best way and probably the only place you can get help. So you're not discouraged because 30 days prior, you're pre-approved. You got one of those pre-approved letters, in the mail. You are pre-approved, Now, okay, 30 days later, let's say you actually do take that seriously, you're encouraged. 30 days later, you manage, you've already, after you got this pre-approval, you may be hopeful enough to at least make an appointment. You got to make a personal appointment to see the banker. And even though today's banking is supposedly 24/7, still, if you want to see the banker himself, and a banker, remember, I don't know if anyone under a certain age like mine remembers the expression in America, oh, this guy, he has banker's hours. I mentioned that to my kids. Nobody understood what I was talking about. Nobody understood it. What are banker's hours? Back in the good old days when I actually put my nickels and pennies into the dime savings bank of Brooklyn, I could never do it. I could never do it personally in the bank because the bank was open banker's hours from 9:30 to 11. And then of course it's a lunch break. And then it was from 2 to 3:30 banker's hours. Okay, back to the analogy, you go bank it out. So finally you make a personal appointment and then which is exactly at 12 noon. And of course you come early and you've already filled out all of the forms to show, you know how you can get a loan. First, you have to prove to the bank that you don't need the money. But even if you need the money, you just want to borrow the money. And whatever you need, whether you need it or want it, you're also good for the money. And furthermore, on top of everything, you actually deserve it. That's a process. Now the banker who finally gets to see you and is willing to talk to you, basically takes on the role, and forgive my irreverence when I compare it to, because I guess being a student of drama, I recall the scene in The Godfather. So basically, instead of, think of the banker as the Godfather. In The Godfather, if you follow the movie, he finally says, to Salazzo, the guy who's coming to ask for, quote unquote, a loan. He says, why me? Why me? Why you come to me? Of course, why you come to me? He's waiting to be flattered, to be acknowledged. So why come to me? He says, which is a rhetorical question. And then Salazzo, the Russia. But okay, let's go back to the regular nice person who just wants to take out the loan. Well, I've heard about you, and you're really the only one. The bank, because I've checked out the insurance. You're the banker. You don't have to kiss the banker's ring, but you do have to acknowledge the banker that he's not only the best source, he's probably the only source for your help. Then what do? Then you call attention to remind the banker of your credit history, okay, to show that you're good for the money. And then there's still one thing that's still outstanding. Then and only then you can show, you have to demonstrate and articulate, okay, you're good for the money, but is the money that you get, are you going to do any good with that money? You may be good for the money, but the money you get, is that going to do good? I've outlined basically the themes as I understand it for Malchiot, Zichronot, and Shofrot, which is all about a request at the moment of coronation, if you will, to articulate Malchiot, the authority to recognize and appreciate that in this moment, it's not just praise and flattery, but an acknowledgement and appreciation of God for being the source for everything that we take and receive on loan in our lives. And Zichronot, where we present and review our credit history, so to speak, for the banker, God, for the sovereign to review. So now that we have some leverage, when you review credit history, you have a leverage to receive that loan. And finally, the shofarot, for the pledge in telling God, the one who lends us everything in life, that we promise to use it for good And when you read the entire section, you won't find a request for some kind of chauffeur to chauffeur you in your Chevy so that you drink champagne in your chalet, forgive the alliteration, but you have shofar and everything that it represents, because you want that to be expressions of what exactly do you want, what are you going to use, what I give you in life. We want to be able to achieve something along the lines that'll bring about justice, peace, equity, honesty, righteousness, generosity, elevation and uplifting of the mind, body, and soul. So after the narrative of the majesty of God, after the review where we should get some credit, you remember God, all of the history, and you also remember how we, your people, have acknowledged you, not just humanity, where we mentioned Noah, Adam and Noah, but as we also continue the Zichronot, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, etc., etc. So with our invoking our Zichronot for leverage to have God, convince God that we're getting what we deserve, and to show through shofarot that we're going to take what we get and use it for good. To conclude, I started out with the opening Psalm 47, Lam Natseach, which we marked at the beginning of the shofar's sounding. So let me conclude with a thought regarding the conclusion of the shofar's sounding. Numerically fulfilled. Actually, it's numerically fulfilled through the 3 times. I don't want to get involved in the pattern of the sounding and the enumeration as it is ordered, because that would take another half hour. But let's just say numerically it's fulfilled with 90. Tekiya Shvarim, where's the formula? It's basically a set of 10 sounds, tashrat, tashat, and tarat, which total actually 30, 3 times, which is 3 times 30 is 90. Why do we have the custom of mea kolot, as I conclude? Mea kolot, 100 sounds. Why 100? So again, no time for the traditional answer even here. It's a very involved answer, which would take a half hour if I referenced the mother of Sisera. I'm not going to do that for the purposes of time and also clarity. Instead, let me quote from Sefer HaTodah, from the classic work by Kitov, who tells us, or who reminds you, if the source is elsewhere other than Kitov. Remember what we said in the beginning of the psalm? Maybe I didn't even mention it. Ashrei ha'am. What is it? What do we say after the psalm, right? And after the bracha, and after the shechiyanu, and then we blow the shofar. Immediately following the initial sounding of the shofar, we say, and I don't have time, but the way I say it, Ashrei ha'am yodei teruah. Yodei teruah. What did I just say? What did I just chant? Ashrei, how fortunate is the nation, the people, Yodei teruah, who finally understand Truah. It's interesting here, Kitov points out, Ashrei ha'am Yodei teruah, Yodei. What's the Hebrew word for understanding? How is it spelled in Hebrew? Anyone? Yud, Vav, Dalet, Ayin, Yud. Take my word for it. Every letter has a numerical equivalent. Gematria. Yodei, bigematria. Anyone there good at math? 100. 100. Interesting. Mea kolot. To have the equivalence and therefore to reach the true understanding, which is equivalent to 100 sounds of the shofar. Now, interesting, Hasfardim nohagim lahosif od trua gedola achat besof tefillah. It's not only 101. The Sfardim, this has been my experience since I've come to Israel. Can you top this? So the Sfardim do the Ashkenazim one better. They don't have 100, they got 101. Why? Asfardim noagim lahosif otru agadola achat besof hatfilah. At the end of the very end, but still before Aleinu, actually it's in the middle of Kaddish, in the middle of, I'll get to that point. And then she'olah me'ev achad, so that if they do that extra, not just the whole 10 sets or 30 sets or 40 sets in the middle of Kaddish, their custom is to do all of that before, but then just one tekiah, kedei lechazek kocho shel malach Michael, in order, it's quite remarkable, to kind of it's like when you go to the bank, you don't just go with yourself. Sometimes you realize you need a co-signer. So we're asking now for help from who? The angel, Michael, Mem, Yud, Chaf, Aleph, Lamed, Michael. Michael in Hebrew, Michael, Shehu Sar Yisrael, the Prince of Israel. See, now we're in the presence of the king, but now we need the prince. Shehu Sar Yisrael b'marom, way on high, v'omeid, and he stands, Melitz al Yisrael, to support Israel, u'mavakesh aleim, and to request from them, Rachamim, mercy, Michael, Mem Yud Chaf Aleph Lamed, equaling 101. 101. So let me finally conclude. The coronation not only requires intensive, extensive preparation, it requires a conclusion, if not completion, as implied. As important as preparation was for the shofar, before the shofar to be sounded, so too does its understanding, Yodea, so too Yediyah, so too does its understanding extend and expand to the level of not just understanding, but Michael, appreciation. This is the extra added dimension of coronation. All of us mortals will go through in all of our stages and sounds of shofar in life. If not in a day, in a year for sure. Or is there anyone here who hasn't within a year's time gone through all of the sounds and the sighs and the cries and the shouts of awe and joy? But we need the conclusion not only to understand, but to appreciate and accept that we do need not only the recognition and understanding, but the acceptance that to praise God, we need help. It's okay to express yourself when it comes to life. Silence may be golden a lot of times, but here at the conclusion for Rosh HaShanah, here it's the squeaky wheel that gets the oil. That's what we say. The Shantov Hashem and Roshi, and also it's a nice analogy for coronation. The squeaky wheel gets the oil. Oil is another symbol for coronation. And the shofar has to be sounded. It has to be sounded to tell us what we want God to accept from us. The opening psalm instructs us, clap your hands, make a voice of joy, make a noise, don't go gently into the night. All of us have made at least 100 sounds covering the entire range of human emotion, from sighing to singing, from crying to cheering. Just this morning, I went through the entire gamut of sound when I joined my wife, Miriam, and we went to the gym together, and I embarrassed her. But it's funny, the instructor, which was not embarrassed. She wasn't alarmed. She actually appreciated that I'm getting something out of all of these sounds. I want to tell you and everyone as I conclude, not to be embarrassed, to accept our humanity, our role as servants, as subjects, as children of God, and to ask God to understand the sounds that we make and as we come to appreciate them, then we can hope and maybe even expect God to do the same. And that's why the last shofar is sounded before the word titkabel in the Kaddish, where we ask God, receive it, accept it, hear it, and listen to the sounds that we make for you, but for our sake as well. I hope and pray that God accepts all the sounds that we make in shul and outside of shul, in life, which we include our songs and prayers and our wishes for a Shana Tova, a blessed and happy new year for this year and for many more to come. Amen.
Amen. Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi Grussgott, for your message today. We have a couple of minutes if anyone would like to put any question or comment into the chat or unmute yourself. We can try to allow other voices to be heard for a moment or two if there are questions or comments.
Yeah, no, I just have one question. No, I saw in the chat you were talking about the Miyushav idea with the congregation who's sitting. So Ira, could you address that a little bit?
I actually said that it's not really understood as far as I feel. It's not nobody is sitting while the shofar is being blown at any time. So miyushav, the way I'm first appreciating, perhaps belatedly, after 60, 70 years or whatever, that miyushav really refers to the coronation, where we get a sense of the king, so to speak, Hamelech. And it's almost like counterintuitive, but we are told and we remind, Hamelech hayoshev al kisei ram v'nisa. The throne, is no throne, there's no coronation or crown. I have to check this out with King Charles. Someone tell me if I'm wrong. The crown is placed while the king is seated, meaning established. So that's.
I also just want to say in modern Hebrew, to be miyushav is to sort of be miyushav b'da'ato.
Yes,
so a person who is, who's kind of, I don't even know how to say it in English, but a person who's
established,
mature,
but settled or rooted.
Yes. Rounded,
yes.
Perhaps.
That's rounded. Thank you. Yes, exactly.
Very good. Thank you very much for that insight and the insightful question along with. I am going to start to close the program with thanks to Rabbi Grussgott and to everyone who joined us. We will send out a link to the video of this program in case you missed any part of it. I know I missed some people were in the waiting room for a little bit of the time. So we will send out a video and we thank our sponsors who we named at the beginning, and I just put those names in the chat. If you haven't already, please join our email list by filling out the form on utj.org. You will find it under Contact Us, and please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Finally, please sign up for the 2 other programs as part of the High Holiday series. The next program is Jewish Martyrdom in Avinu Malkeinu with Rabbi Stephen Sachs on Thursday, September 29th at 8:00 p.m. Eastern Time. You can learn more about those programs and sign up at utj.org/utj-events/upcoming-events. And I put that link in the chat so you can follow it along. Thank you once again to everyone for joining us, and we wish everyone a very happy and healthy new year. And again, a final thanks to our presenter, Rabbi Ira Grussgott.
Thank you. You're welcome. Thank you, Noah, and everyone involved with UTJ for making this possible. Shana Tova.
Thank you.
Shana Tova.
Shana Tova.